My son invited me to dinner, but one text said, "Leave now." Have you ever trusted someone you love, only to feel the ground disappear beneath your feet? I sat at my son's elegant dinner table, thinking we were mending the silence of a year apart. Then my phone buzzed. One message, just 7 words. "Get up and leave, don't say a word." My blood turned cold. Within half an hour the police were at his door. Stay with me, because what unfolded next was darker and more shocking than I could have ever imagined. Every evening felt the same since Eleanor passed. The kitchen light buzzed faintly above me as I stood at the sink, washing the same mug she used to drink her morning coffee from. Her favorite one, chipped on the rim, the one she refused to throw away because she said it held memories. I washed it carefully as though she were still here to scold me if I scrubbed too hard. I told myself it was just a habit, but deep down I knew it was a ritual, a way to keep her close. I placed it back on the dish rack in its usual spot, like a shrine to a time when laughter filled these walls. The house had grown too quiet. No sound of her humming while she cooked, no gentle reminders about paying bills or folding laundry. Just me and the hum of the refrigerator, decorated with magnets holding faded photos. My eyes always lingered on the picture of Michael at his high school graduation. 17 years old, smiling with all the world ahead of him, Eleanor's arm proudly wrapped around his shoulder. Back then we still believed family meant forever. Back then we still had dinners together without money or pride getting in the way. Now that photo felt like a relic from another life. I turned off the water and dried my hands slowly, listening to the silence press against me. Sometimes I swore I could hear Eleanor's voice, gentle but firm, telling me to stop isolating myself, to call someone, to live again. But my phone rarely rang except for restaurant managers asking routine questions. My armchair in the living room had molded to my body after so many lonely evenings. The newspaper stacks on the side table had grown higher, the crossword puzzles left unfinished. I sank into the chair, staring at the ceiling where shadows drifted across like reminders of how empty this place had become. Grief has a way of dulling time. Some days I hardly knew if it was Tuesday or Friday until the paper landed at the door. Meals became simple, sometimes just toast and coffee. Conversations reduced to the brief nods exchanged with Mrs. Harris from next door when she checked her mail. I told myself I preferred the quiet, but there was no denying the ache that gnawed at me every night. Loneliness is louder than any argument. It echoes in every empty room and lingers long after the world goes to sleep. I thought often about the last argument with Michael. He had come to me full of excitement, talking about an investment opportunity that promised quick returns. When I refused to loan him the money, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard Eleanor flinched. I told myself I was protecting what we had built, but deep inside I wondered if I could have spoken with more patience, if I could have been softer. That night was the last time I saw him. The silence that followed stretched into months, then a year. Each day the distance between us grew heavier, like a stone pressing down on my chest. Eleanor used to say families always find their way back to each other given enough time. I wanted to believe that, but each evening made me doubt her words. I would sit in the kitchen, staring at that chipped mug, thinking of how easily everything had shattered. Pride had replaced love, silence had replaced laughter. I missed my son. I missed the simple chaos of family life. But I told myself he had chosen his path, and I had mine. Sometimes I wandered through the house at night, brushing my fingers against the furniture we had picked together, stopping by her dresser where her perfume bottles still stood, dust gathering around them. I would lift the smallest bottle, the one she wore on our anniversaries, and breathe in what was left. The scent brought her back for a moment, softening the emptiness. But when I set it down, the silence returned, colder than before. I often wondered how I had aged so quickly. The man in the mirror looked tired, the gray at my temples spreading faster than I expected. Without Eleanor's voice filling the house, the years seemed to press harder against me. I felt smaller somehow, as if the walls themselves had grown taller. I told myself I had to keep going, for the restaurants, for the memory of what we built together. But in truth, I was just moving through days, waiting for something to change. That night, as I sat in the armchair staring at the old graduation photo, I whispered into the stillness, telling Eleanor I wished I had done better with Michael, that I wished I could see him one more time. The words sounded fragile in the empty room, but they carried the weight of every regret I held. I closed my eyes and listened to the quiet, never expecting that soon the silence would be broken, that a single phone call would change everything. The phone rang while I was still staring at the photo on the fridge. At first I thought it was another manager calling about a late delivery or a broken fryer, nothing unusual. I reached for it slowly, already forming the words I always used to reassure whoever was on the other end. But when I glanced at the screen, my breath caught. The name glowing in those small letters made my hand shake. Michael, my son. After a year of silence, his name looked almost foreign on that screen, like something out of a dream I was afraid to touch. I answered on the third ring, my voice rough from surprise. "Hello," the line crackled softly, then I heard him. "Dad." Just that one word, and suddenly I was back in every memory I had of him. His voice carried that same nervous tone he had as a boy whenever he broke something and wasn't sure how angry I'd be. For a moment I couldn't find words. Too much time had passed, too many nights of regret. Finally I said his name, barely more than a whisper. "Michael." He hesitated, then said, "I know it's been too long, way too long." His breathing sounded heavy, like he was holding something back. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge to steady myself. Part of me wanted to hang up, to protect the fragile peace I had built out of loneliness. But another part of me, the father who never stopped caring, couldn't let go. "How are you, son?" I asked, my chest tight with both relief and suspicion. "I'm good, really good," he said quickly, too quickly. "Claire and I, we've been talking. We realized how much we miss having you around, how much we miss family." That word hit me harder than I expected. Family. I hadn't heard it from him in so long. My throat tightened, and I found myself saying the truth before I could stop it. "I miss it too." Silence lingered for a moment, heavy with everything we had never said. Then his voice softened. "Dad, would you consider coming to dinner tonight? Claire is making that pot roast you always loved. We could sit down, talk like we used to." I froze. Dinner tonight. It felt impossible. Too sudden. My eyes drifted to Eleanor's picture smiling from the fridge. She always said families find their way back given enough time. Maybe this was the time she meant. But suspicion gnawed at me. Why now, after all this silence? I wanted to ask, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I heard myself ask what time. 7:30, he said with relief. "I'll text you the address." We moved to Montclair last year. Montclair. That name carried weight. I knew the area, expensive, polished, nothing like our old neighborhood. Pride swelled in me for a moment, but quickly gave way to doubt. How could he afford it? I pushed the thought aside. He said again, "Dad, we don't want to waste any more time. We've already lost enough. Please come." His voice sounded so much like the boy who used to cling to my hand in thunderstorms that I couldn't refuse. I said I would be there. When the call ended, I just stood there, staring at the silent phone. My heart thudded as if I had just run a mile. The photo of Eleanor seemed to look back at me, her eyes alive with quiet encouragement. I could almost hear her say, "It's time. Henry, it's time to go home." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that tonight could heal what had been broken. I walked back to the living room and sat in the armchair, still clutching the phone. Doubt whispered in the back of my mind, reminding me of the last time Michael left this house, his voice sharp, his eyes cold. He had chosen pride over trust that night. Could he really have changed? Could I? I didn't know, but the thought of seeing him again stirred something in me that loneliness had almost buried. I closed my eyes and let the sound of his voice replay in my head. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a flicker of hope, fragile, uncertain, but alive. Tonight, I told myself I would see my son again. Tonight, I would find out if Eleanor's words were true, if families really could find their way back. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, the quiet of the house pressing in on me. My hand still held the phone as though it might ring again and tell me it was all a mistake. The clock on the wall ticked with steady certainty, reminding me that time was moving whether I was ready or not. 7:30 was only a few hours away. My heart beat faster than it should have, and I realized I had to do something I had not done in months. I had to get myself ready for company, for family. I walked upstairs to the bedroom, the one that had become a museum of Eleanor's presence. Her perfume bottles still lined the dresser, some nearly empty but untouched, waiting like they expected her return. Dust lay thick on the lace curtains that let in a thin stream of afternoon light. I pulled open the closet, the familiar smell of cedar filling the air. My fingers brushed over worn flannels, old sweaters, and shirts I wore to the restaurants, until they stopped at a garment bag hanging untouched. I pulled it forward slowly. The navy suit. Eleanor had insisted on buying it for me when Michael graduated from high school. "You need something decent for occasions that matter," she had said, smoothing the lapel with her careful hands. "And our son's graduation is about as important as it gets." I could still hear her voice in the back of my mind as I unzipped the bag. The fabric felt heavier than I remembered, carrying with it the weight of memories. I thought of walking into that auditorium with her at my side, both of us beaming as Michael crossed the stage. For a moment, pride swelled in me again, before it sank beneath the years of silence that followed. I laid the suit across the bed and sat beside it, staring at it like it was some relic from a better life. That suit had seen anniversaries, business milestones, even Eleanor's funeral. Tonight it would see another milestone, though I wasn't sure if it would bring healing or more heartbreak. I rose and went to the bathroom, letting the hot water of the shower run until the mirror fogged. The steam loosened something in me that had been tight for too long. As I shaved, I caught my own reflection and had to stop. The man looking back at me seemed older than I felt inside. The gray at my temples had spread further, the lines around my mouth had deepened. My eyes carried the dullness of too many lonely nights. Would Michael notice? Would Claire see the way life had worn me down? For a moment I almost put the razor down and walked away, but then Eleanor's voice echoed again in my memory. "You always show up with dignity, Henry, no matter what." I finished shaving and reached for my aftershave, the same bottle I had used for years. Next to it still stood Eleanor's perfume, the scent of her Christmas tradition. I touched the glass gently and whispered that I hoped she would be proud of me for trying. Dressing felt like slipping into a version of myself I hadn't been in years. The suit was a little looser now, but it still fit. I buttoned the jacket, tightened the tie, and looked at myself in the mirror. I almost didn't recognize the man staring back, but he looked steadier than the lonely figure I had seen that morning. Back downstairs, I opened the cabinet where I kept the good bottles. I reached for the aged bourbon I had been saving. It seemed right to bring something with me, a gesture of peace. I ran my hand over the label, remembering the night Eleanor bought it for me, saying, "One day you'll want to open this for something special. I hope tonight could be that day." As I slipped the bottle into a paper bag, my phone buzzed with Michael's text. The address appeared on the screen, Montclair, New Jersey, a neighborhood known for wealth and manicured lawns. My brows furrowed. How had he managed to settle there so quickly? Last I remembered he was barely making ends meet. I pushed the thought aside and told myself I would see for myself soon enough. I called for a car and stood by the window, waiting. Outside, the neighborhood looked the same as always. Mrs. Harris watered her front garden, and the sound of children echoed faintly from down the block. I realized with a pang that those sounds had once filled my own home, Michael running through the hallways, Eleanor laughing as she tried to keep up with him. When the car pulled up, I took one last look around the house. The chipped mug sat drying on the rack. Eleanor's picture still smiled from the fridge. I touched the frame gently and whispered, "Wish me luck." Then I straightened my tie, grabbed the bottle, and stepped outside, feeling a mix of fear and hope settle into my chest. Tonight I would see my son again, and whatever waited for me, I knew it was time. The ride to Montclair felt longer than the clock suggested. The driver made small talk about traffic and the weather, but I barely heard him. My thoughts were tangled between excitement and unease. As the city blocks gave way to wide avenues and clean sidewalks, I realized I was leaving my world behind. Brownstones and corner stores faded into manicured lawns, iron gates, and houses that looked more like estates than homes. My stomach tightened as the car slowed in front of Michael's address. I stared out the window at a house that seemed like it belonged in a magazine. The driveway curved around a stone fountain, water rising and falling in a graceful arc. Tall columns framed the front entrance, and light spilled warmly from windows 3 stories high. 2 luxury cars sat gleaming near the garage, polished as if they had never touched a rainy street. The lawn was perfect, not a blade out of place, edged with boxwood shrubs trimmed into precise shapes. It was beautiful, but it felt unreal, as if I had stepped onto a movie set. The driver turned to me with a smile. "Lucky son you've got," he said. I forced a smile back, pressing a tip into his hand before stepping out. The evening air was cool, and smelled faintly of cut grass and flowers. My shoes clicked against the stone path as I walked toward the front door. For a moment I hesitated. This place felt like another world, far from the one Michael had grown up in. I remembered the small house we used to live in, Eleanor humming while she painted the kitchen walls a cheerful yellow. Now here I was, standing before a mansion that looked like it could swallow my old life whole. Before I could reach for the brass handle, the door opened. A woman in her 50s stood there, dressed neatly in black, her hair streaked with gray. Her eyes met mine, kind but carrying something else I couldn't quite place. "Good evening, sir," she said softly. "You must be Mr. Collins. I'm Isabel. Please, come in." Her tone was warm, but her eyes flickered with something that almost felt like warning before she quickly looked away. The foyer was overwhelming. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. A sweeping staircase curved upward like something out of a grand hotel. Oil paintings lined the walls, framed in gold, and fresh flowers filled the air with a faint, sweet perfume. I had walked into restaurants more modest than this entryway. My chest tightened as I followed Isabel inside. "Dad?" Michael's voice echoed from deeper in the house, and I turned to see him walking toward me. He looked like a man I barely recognized. His suit was sharp, his hair cut with precision, his smile wide and practiced. Yet behind the polish, I caught something flickering in his eyes, something strained. He embraced me tightly, holding on a little longer than expected. "You look great," he said, stepping back to study me. "Really, Dad, you look great." Claire appeared beside him, gliding across the marble floor like she had rehearsed it. She wore a silk dress that shimmered under the chandelier, her jewelry subtle but clearly expensive. She leaned in to kiss my cheek, her perfume enveloping me. "Jonathan, you look wonderful," she said brightly. "We're so happy you're here." I managed a smile, though everything around me felt staged, like a performance meant to impress. "This place is incredible," I said, glancing around the grand foyer. Michael laughed lightly. "Real estate, Dad. Right place at the right time. Lucky break." His voice carried confidence, but the quickness of his answer struck me. I nodded, saying nothing more, though unease stirred in my gut. Isabel quietly took my coat, her eyes meeting mine once more. For a brief second, I saw that flicker again, a look that seemed to carry more than politeness. Concern, perhaps. But then she lowered her gaze and disappeared down the hallway with my jacket draped neatly over her arm. Claire slipped her arm through mine with a smile that felt practiced. "Come, let's get you settled. Dinner is ready, and we want tonight to be perfect." Her words rang too smooth, too careful, but I let her lead me forward. My eyes lingered on Michael, who walked slightly behind us, his jaw tight as though he was holding back something unspoken. As we moved deeper into the house, passing more rooms decorated with fine art and furniture polished to a shine, I felt both awe and disquiet. Pride swelled that my son seemed so successful, but doubt whispered just as loudly. How had he climbed from asking me for money to affording a mansion like this? Each step forward felt like walking into a story I hadn't been told yet, one that might hold answers I wasn't ready to hear. When we reached the dining room, the sight stopped me cold. A long mahogany table stretched across the room, set with china and silver that glowed under another crystal chandelier. The table was set for 4, though I saw only 3 of us. My hand tightened on the bottle of bourbon I carried, my peace offering. Tonight was supposed to be about family. I told myself to believe that, even as a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that something about all this was just a little too perfect. Michael reached for the bottle in my hand before I even had the chance to offer it. His eyes lit up when he read the label, and he let out a low whistle. "Dad, this is incredible," he said, almost too enthusiastically. "You shouldn't have. But I'm glad you did." He clapped me on the shoulder with a little too much force, like he was trying to reassure both of us. Claire smiled as she glided toward the table, her silk dress whispering against the floor. She placed a delicate hand on my arm and said, "You always were thoughtful, Jonathan. This will make the evening even more special." Her words felt warm, but something about the way she delivered them carried the polish of someone used to performing. Michael poured the bourbon into crystal tumblers already waiting at the center of the table. The amber liquid glowed in the chandelier light. He filled mine higher than I would have poured for myself, then added just enough to his own glass to make it look generous. Claire raised her wine glass, her nails catching the light like polished shells. "To family," she said with a smile so radiant it almost looked rehearsed. Michael's face softened as he added quietly, "To Mom." He glanced at me quickly, his voice catching. "She would have wanted us together like this." The words struck me deep. I raised my glass, my throat tightening as I whispered, "To Eleanor." We clinked our glasses, crystal chiming in the heavy air, and I took a long sip. The bourbon burned pleasantly down my throat, spreading warmth through my chest. For the first time that evening I allowed myself to think maybe this night could be what it seemed, a chance to start over. Claire set her glass down gently and leaned toward me, her expression one of attentive curiosity. "Michael tells me you built your restaurants from the ground up," she said. "I would love to hear more about it." Her eyes were bright, but behind them I sensed something sharper, as though she were studying me. Michael jumped in before I could answer. "Don't be modest, Dad. 7 locations now." He filled my glass again before I even realized I had finished the first one. "That's impressive by any standard." I smiled faintly, caught off guard by the fact he had kept track during our silence. "Just hard work," I said, trying to downplay it. "Eleanor always said to treat employees like family and customers like friends. That was our only real secret." Michael nodded eagerly. "That's exactly what I told Claire." He glanced at her, then back at me, his eyes bright but restless. "We've been talking a lot about how family businesses survive, passing things down, keeping legacies alive." Claire added smoothly, "It must be so rewarding to know you've built something worth carrying on." She tilted her head, her smile gracious but intent. "Have you thought much about slowing down, maybe making plans for the future?" The words landed heavily, though she said them lightly. I forced a chuckle, brushing it off. "One day at a time," I said. "The restaurants keep me busy." Michael leaned closer, his hand resting briefly on mine. "But you can't work forever, Dad. You've done more than enough. Maybe it's time to think about what comes next." His tone was gentle, but there was something underneath it, a push that made me shift uncomfortably in my seat. Before I could answer, Isabel appeared quietly, setting down small plates of appetizers arranged with care. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed mine in front of me, and for a second our eyes met. There was something there, something she wasn't saying. She gave the faintest nod before retreating back toward the kitchen. I took another sip of bourbon, more quickly than I intended. The warmth in my chest grew, and the edges of the room seemed a little softer than before. I told myself it was just the drink hitting me faster than usual, combined with the weight of the evening. I wanted to believe it was nothing more than that. Michael refilled my glass again with practiced ease, his smile unwavering. "Tonight is about fresh starts," he said firmly, "about family and forgiveness." He raised his glass once more. to new beginnings. Claire's voice chimed in almost on top of his. To letting go of the past. She looked at me closely as she said it, her expression calm but searching. I lifted my glass slowly, feeling the weight of their eyes on me. The amber liquid swirled as I tilted it. To family, I said softly, though a small unease rippled through me even as I drank. The sweetness of the bourbon lingered on my tongue, but something about the way they watched me left me colder than the drink made me warm. Michael smiled wider, satisfied, and reached for the bottle again. I sat back in my chair, listening to the soft clink of glass and silver around us, wondering if the reunion I had longed for was as simple as it seemed, or if something more carefully planned was unfolding beneath the polished surface of this perfect evening. The food was set before us with such precision it could have been a photograph in a magazine. Isabel moved quietly, her steps almost soundless on the polished floor, her eyes down but her hands shaking just enough for me to notice. She placed a bowl of soup before me and quickly retreated, leaving the three of us in a glow of chandelier light that felt too warm, too close. Claire unfolded her napkin with a graceful flick and asked about my health. "Do you still go for those morning walks in Brooklyn, Jonathan?" I nodded and told her I tried to, though my knees argued with me more these days. She laughed lightly and said walking is the best medicine. But her gaze lingered on me a little longer than polite interest would warrant. It felt like she was assessing me, measuring how much strength I still had left. Michael leaned in with that boyish smile I remembered from years ago. "Dad, do you ever think about retiring? Just handing it all over to someone else and enjoying the peace you've earned?" His tone was casual, but the way he asked left no room for pretending it was an idle question. I shifted in my chair, adjusting my tie as I answered. "The restaurants keep me busy, son. They keep me going, one day at a time." Claire sipped her wine, her eyes fixed on me over the rim of her glass. "And who do you see taking care of them when that day comes?" The question was soft, framed as curiosity, but it cut sharp. I set my spoon down slowly, trying to hide the tremor in my hand. "That's something I've never rushed to decide," I said carefully. Michael chuckled, though it sounded forced. "Well, you know I've always been interested in business. Real estate, restaurants, money. It's all about timing, Dad. About knowing when to pass the torch." He poured more bourbon into my glass without asking, his hand steady and deliberate. I noticed his own glass had barely been touched. I took a sip, slower this time, watching him. His eyes darted toward Claire before settling back on me. She reached for the bread, slicing it neatly, her movements elegant but her words sharp. "It must be hard carrying all that responsibility alone. You've built so much, but without a plan for the future it could all slip away. Don't you worry about that." The room felt smaller, the chandelier's light pressing down on me. I managed a smile that felt thin. "Eleanor and I always said we'd take things as they came. That was our plan." Michael leaned forward, his elbows on the table now, his smile fading into something more earnest, almost desperate. "But Mom isn't here anymore, Dad. You're alone. Don't you think it's time to make some decisions?" The words hit me harder than I expected. I thought of Eleanor, of the nights we stayed up talking about the restaurants, about Michael, about family. My throat tightened. I glanced at Isabel, who had just returned to refill the water glasses. She avoided my eyes, but her hands trembled so much that a drop spilled onto the polished wood before she quickly wiped it away. I turned back to Michael, forcing steadiness into my voice. "Decisions will come when they need to. Right now I'm content as things are." Claire placed her fork down gently, her smile unwavering. "But contentment isn't the same as security, Jonathan. Don't you think Eleanor would have wanted everything safe, planned, in the right hands?" The mention of Eleanor's name from her lips sent a chill down my spine. I took another sip of bourbon, though my head already felt light. My vision blurred slightly around the edges, though I told myself it was nothing more than age mixing with strong drink. Michael's hand landed on mine again, warm but insistent. "Dad, we just want what's best for you. We want to make sure everything you worked for doesn't get lost." His words were gentle, but beneath them I heard the push, the urgency. My heart thudded against my ribs, louder than it should have been. I leaned back slowly, pulling my hand free. "I appreciate the concern, son," I said, trying to keep my tone calm, "but I'm not ready to hand over my life's work. Not yet." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Isabel clearing plates in the background. Michael forced a smile, his jaw tightening just slightly. "Of course, Dad. We'll talk more about it later." Claire raised her glass again, her eyes never leaving mine. "To the future," she said softly. I raised mine out of politeness, though unease had settled deep in my gut. The bourbon burned sharper this time, sharper than it should have. And as I set my glass down, I could not shake the feeling that every question they asked carried an edge hidden just beneath the polished surface. The conversation blurred as the evening wore on. Claire's voice was smooth, Michael's laughter too quick, and my glass seemed to refill itself no matter how slowly I tried to drink. The warmth in my chest had grown into something heavier, a fog pressing against my temples. I told myself it was just the bourbon, but I had never been this light-headed after 2 glasses in my life. I tried to focus on the stories Michael was telling about real estate, deals that never quite had clear details, numbers that seemed to dance around without settling anywhere. Claire nodded along, her eyes darting to me with every mention of money, every casual remark about future planning. Their questions kept circling back to retirement, succession, legal documents. I smiled. I answered as best I could, but inside me something stirred, a whisper of doubt I couldn't ignore. Just as I lifted my glass again, my phone vibrated in my jacket pocket. The sound was muffled, but sharp enough to cut through the haze in my mind. I excused myself with a mumbled apology and reached for the phone, shielding the screen as I drew it out beneath the table. My vision swam for a moment before the letters came into focus. An unknown number. One new message. I tapped it open, expecting maybe a question from one of the managers at the restaurants. Instead, the words hit me like ice water poured down my spine. "Stand up and leave. Don't say a word to your son." My fingers tightened around the phone, the letters glowing brighter than anything else in the room. I read it again, then a third time, as if repetition might make the words change into something harmless. They didn't. Each line burned into me with more urgency. "Leave. Don't say a word." I felt the blood drain from my face. Claire's voice suddenly sounded far away, muffled, as if I were underwater. Michael was watching me closely, though he tried to disguise it with a smile. "Dad, you all right? You look pale." His voice cut through the fog, too sharp, too concerned. I forced my lips into something like a smile. "Just rich food," I said, my voice shaking more than I wanted. "Hits harder than expected." I slipped the phone back into my pocket, my hands trembling. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic beat that made my head swim even more. I lifted my water glass, taking a long drink, hoping it might steady me. But the words of that message pulsed through my mind with every swallow. Stand up and leave. Who would send me something like that? Who knew where I was? Who would warn me away from my own son's table? The bourbon tasted different now, bitter and heavy on my tongue. I tried to shake it off, but the edges of the room felt unsteady. Isabel passed through the doorway carrying another tray, and for a fleeting second, her eyes lifted and met mine. Something in that look tightened the knot in my chest. She looked away quickly, her lips pressed thin as if holding back words she couldn't say. Michael leaned closer, his tone light but his eyes sharp. "Maybe you should take a little air, Dad. Walk it off." His suggestion came too easily, as though he had been waiting for me to falter. Claire placed a cool hand on my arm, her fingers lingering too long. "Yes, Jonathan, you should rest a little. We can bring dessert later." My throat tightened. I nodded, pushing my chair back slowly, trying to look calm though my legs felt unsteady beneath me. The chandelier's glow shimmered too bright, the polished table stretching longer than it should have. I told them I needed the restroom, my words slurred enough that I prayed they would think it was just the drink. Michael pointed down the hallway, second door on the left. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I walked away, each step careful, my pulse pounding in my ears. The phone in my pocket felt heavy, the message searing against me like a brand. Stand up and leave. Don't say a word. I repeated it to myself, clutching at the words like a lifeline as the dining room faded behind me. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with expensive artwork, each frame catching the light in a way that made the walls shimmer. My hand brushed against the cool wood as I steadied myself, my thoughts spinning. The warning could be a cruel joke, or it could be the truth. But the dizziness in my head, the way Michael kept filling my glass, the constant questions about my future, it all began to form a picture I didn't want to see. I reached the door he had indicated, but my steps carried me past it. Something inside me refused to turn the handle. I kept walking toward the faint glow at the end of the hall, where I thought the kitchen might be. My breath came shallow, my chest tight with fear. Whoever had sent that message knew more than I did, and my only choice now was to listen. Eleanor's voice echoed faintly in my memory. Listen first, questions later. I pushed forward, each step heavier than the last, toward whatever waited beyond the glow of the kitchen lights. The hallway opened into a kitchen that could have belonged to a hotel. Marble counters stretched further than the width of my old living room. Chrome appliances gleamed under recessed lights. The air carried the scent of roasted meat and herbs, so rich it clung to the back of my throat. I stood there for a moment, swaying slightly, my hand pressed against the wall to steady myself. At the far sink, Isabel washed glasses with slow, deliberate movements. The sound of water trickling over crystal filled the room. Her back was straight, her head slightly bowed, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She did not turn when I entered. She acted as if I were invisible, her focus fixed on the sink. But I knew she heard me. My shoes clicked softly against the tile, and still she did not acknowledge me. I hesitated, unsure whether to speak, unsure if my voice would even come out steady. Then I noticed something small. Her hands trembled as she placed a glass on the drying rack. She paused for the briefest second, her shoulders lifting with a breath that seemed heavier than it should have been. And then she went back to her task, her silence louder than words. I followed her gaze, though she wasn't looking at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the water, but her posture spoke volumes. She was telling me something without speaking at all. My chest tightened. I remembered the message on my phone. Stand up and leave. Don't say a word. Was it her? I turned my eyes toward the far end of the kitchen. A back door stood there, framed by glass panes, leading out to what looked like a garden. A sliver of moonlight spilled across the floor where the curtains had not been fully drawn. My breath caught. Freedom was just beyond that door. I could feel it. I stepped slowly past Isabel, waiting for her to stop me, to acknowledge me, to confirm my suspicion. She never lifted her head. She kept scrubbing, her hands moving in steady rhythm, though I noticed she pressed the glass too hard, almost as if channeling nerves into the motion. As I drew level with her, her shoulders tensed, and for a heartbeat I thought she might turn. But she didn't. She let me pass, her silence the clearest warning I had ever received. The back door opened smoothly with hardly a sound. The night air hit me like a slap, cool and sharp against my face. I drew in a deep breath, my chest expanding for the first time since I sat down at that table. The yard stretched wide and manicured, every hedge trimmed, every path lit by small lamps buried in the grass. It was beautiful, too beautiful, but to me it looked like escape. The grass was damp beneath my shoes as I hurried across the lawn. Motion sensors clicked on, spilling bright light over my path. I flinched at first, afraid the sudden glow would draw Michael and Claire, but no voices followed, no footsteps echoed. Only the hum of the lamps and the faint splash of the fountain carried across the yard. The gate at the far end loomed ahead, black iron with a simple latch. Beyond it I saw the faint yellow of street lights, the quiet outline of a residential road lined with trees. My lungs burned, but I pushed forward, my heart hammering in my ears. Each step felt like it carried me further away from family, yet closer to survival. I reached the gate and lifted the latch with trembling hands. The iron creaked faintly, the sound far louder to my panicked ears than it truly was. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see Michael striding across the lawn, Claire calling out in false concern. But the house stood quiet, its windows glowing warmly, hiding whatever plans lay inside. The gate swung open, and I stepped onto the pavement of the street beyond. The silence here was different, freer. A car passed at the far end of the road, its headlights sweeping across trimmed hedges before disappearing into the night. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my thumb fumbling over the screen. I opened the rideshare app, my vision swimming for a moment before focusing. Pick up in 5 minutes. 1 block over. I clutched the phone to my chest, the glow lighting my shaking hands. The words of the text still echoed inside me, as clear as when I first read them. "Stand up and leave. Don't say a word." Isabel had said nothing at all, yet she had told me everything I needed. Her silence, her trembling hands, her refusal to meet my eyes, it was all part of the same warning. I walked quickly down the quiet street, the cool air filling my lungs, the dew dampening the edges of my polished shoes. The mansion disappeared behind me, swallowed by darkness and distance. Ahead, the glow of approaching headlights cut through the night. I breathed out a shaky sigh. For the first time since the evening began, I felt the weight of survival press heavier than the ache of family. Eleanor's voice stirred again in my memory, soft but insistent. "Listen first, questions later." And I had listened. My pulse slowed slightly as I neared the corner, though the dizziness in my head reminded me I wasn't safe yet. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, the bourbon still burning in my stomach. Somewhere behind me, that perfect house held more secrets than I wanted to know, but I had heard the warning, and I had obeyed, and that choice had carried me, step by trembling step, out into the night. The street was quiet as I waited at the corner, the glow of the street lamp throwing long shadows across the empty road. My breath came heavy in the cool air, the taste of bourbon still clinging to my tongue. My phone buzzed in my hand, not from the rideshare app this time, but with an incoming call. The number was unfamiliar, yet something in my chest told me it was connected to the message that had just saved me. I hesitated, my thumb hovering, then I answered. A calm voice spoke on the other end, measured and careful. "I hoped you would call," it said. My grip on the phone tightened. "Who is this? Why did you warn me?" The voice paused, as though choosing each word with deliberate caution. "You were in immediate danger tonight. Your son owes $2.5 million to men who don't forgive debts. Men who break bones before they take lives." My stomach dropped, the pavement beneath my feet seeming to tilt. "That's impossible," I said, my voice rough. "He lives in a mansion. He has cars. He told me he was successful. All of it borrowed," the voice replied. "Mortgages stacked. Loans from people who operate outside the law. He's drowning, and he thought you were his lifeline." The dizziness I felt at the table returned in full force, though now it was sharpened by fear rather than bourbon. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "The bottle you brought," the voice said. "They slipped something into it before you arrived. Zetronol, a sedative that multiplies the effects of alcohol. 2 drinks feel like 6. 3 would have left you docile, suggestible, unable to resist signing anything put in front of you." My hand shook so badly I had to press the phone harder to my ear to keep it steady. I thought of Michael's eager smile as he poured my glass, Claire's delicate touch on my arm, the way they circled the conversation back to succession and retirement. My voice cracked. "Legal papers. Prepared in advance," the caller confirmed. "Power of attorney, transfer of assets. All that was missing was your signature. In the morning they would have claimed you were of sound mind, that you willingly chose to hand everything to your son. By the time you realized, it would have been too late." I pressed my free hand against the cool metal of the street sign beside me, trying to steady myself. My mind spun through every moment of the evening, replaying each look, each refill of my glass, each question with hidden edges. Michael's eyes flashed in my memory, desperate and bright, and I realized the truth I had been refusing to see. "My son," I whispered. He wouldn't. The words died before they left my mouth fully. The voice on the line remained steady. Desperation drives people to choices they swore they would never make. He has less than 2 weeks to pay, and he was willing to sacrifice you to save himself. The Uber pulled up then, headlights washing over me. I climbed into the back seat, nodding quickly to the driver who asked for my destination. "Brooklyn," I rasped, giving him my address. As we pulled away, I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. "Why are you helping me?" There was another pause, heavier this time. "Because what they planned was wrong. Because you deserve to know the truth about the people sitting across from you." I closed my eyes, Eleanor's face filling my mind. She had always believed family could find its way back, but she had never imagined this. My chest ached, my breath coming shallow. "Who are you?" I asked again, my voice hoarse. The silence stretched, then the voice answered softly. "Someone who sees more than they are supposed to. Someone who couldn't watch in silence." My heart thudded. Isabel. The image of her trembling hands, her refusal to meet my eyes, the quiet way she let me pass through the kitchen. There was no confirmation, no denial, only the sound of steady breathing on the line. Then the voice said, "Be careful. They'll realize you're gone soon, and desperation makes people dangerous. Protect yourself. Move your assets before he can reach them. He knows your business inside and out." The line went quiet. The call ended. I stared at the screen, my reflection faint in the glass. The city lights slid past outside the car window, each one a blur through the sting of my eyes. My phone buzzed again, this time with missed calls from Michael. 3, then 4. My son's name flashing with every vibration. I didn't answer. My hand shook as I slid the phone face down on the seat beside me. My throat burned with the bitterness of betrayal. In one evening I had gained him back, and in the same evening I had lost him again. The boy who once clung to my hand in thunderstorms had grown into a man willing to poison me for money. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay back there, sir?" I nodded stiffly, though I barely trusted my voice. Outside, Montclair's manicured lawns faded into the dark blur of highways. Each mile carried me closer to Brooklyn, to the safety of my worn chair and Eleanor's waiting photo. But safety no longer felt enough. My life had shifted in one dinner, and nothing would ever be the same. The hum of the car filled the silence as we left the grand houses behind and merged onto the highway. The driver kept his eyes on the road, soft jazz spilling faintly from the radio. I stared out the window, watching the blur of headlights and wondering how everything had turned upside down so quickly. My son had welcomed me with open arms, poured my glass, smiled at me like he was a boy again, and all of it had been a mask for something darker. The thought pressed against my chest until I felt like I couldn't breathe. My phone buzzed again beside me. Another call from Michael. The 5th one. I let it ring, then fall into silence. A text followed almost immediately. "Dad, where are you? We're worried sick." The words lit the screen like a cruel joke. I turned it face down again, pressing my palm hard against it, as if I could crush the lie out of those letters. I thought of Eleanor. She always believed love could soften even the hardest hearts. She told me more than once that Michael just needed time, that he would come around. I had clung to that hope like a lifeline after she was gone. Tonight had felt like proof she was right, proof we could be a family again. And then the message came, and everything I believed shattered. I saw him clearly now, not as the boy who used to run through sprinklers in the summer or sit with her at the kitchen table, but as a man willing to hand me over to greed to save himself. The car sped toward Brooklyn, but the distance brought me no comfort. If I stayed silent, if I just went home and locked my door, Michael would try again. He was desperate, and desperate men don't stop after one failed attempt. He would find another way to get to me, another way to dig himself out of the hole he had chosen. He had 11 days left, the caller said. 11 days before the men he owed would come for him. 11 days to choose between saving himself by destroying me or facing the consequences. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the seat, my fingers gripping Eleanor's photo in my wallet. Her smile looked back at me, steady, kind, unshaken. I heard her voice as clearly as if she were sitting beside me. Family means telling the truth even when it hurts. I wanted to believe she would forgive me for what I was considering, but the thought of destroying my son in the eyes of the law made me sick. The driver glanced at me in the mirror. "Long night, sir." I managed a nod, unable to explain the weight pressing on me. He turned the music up slightly, giving me space, though his eyes lingered a little too long as if he sensed I was unraveling. I pulled my phone into my lap and stared at it. I could ignore the truth, return home, let the silence wrap around me again. I could pray Michael would come to his senses, that he would walk into a police station on his own and confess. But deep down I knew he wouldn't. He had already crossed a line by trying to drug me, by preparing documents with my name. Once a person takes that step, they rarely turn back. Another message came through. "Dad, please answer. We just want to talk." I almost laughed, though it came out more like a broken sound in my throat. Talk. That was what we had shared at the table, wasn't it? Questions dressed up as concern, smiles sharpened into blades. I pressed delete without reading further. I looked back at Eleanor's photo and asked her aloud in a whisper, "What would you do?" The driver shifted slightly, pretending not to hear. In my mind I heard her again. She would never let fear decide. She would stand. She would fight. She would choose what was right, no matter how much it hurt. The decision crystallized in me like ice hardening under pressure. If I went home tonight and did nothing, I would lose everything Eleanor and I had built. Worse, I would lose myself. My son had made his choice, and now I had to make mine. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. About stopping a man who had already betrayed every bond we once shared. I lifted the phone and dialed 3 numbers I had never thought I would. The voice that answered was brisk, professional. "Emergency services. What's your emergency?" My hand shook, but my voice came steady. "My family is attempting to poison me for money. I have evidence, and they are still at the location with documents prepared." The dispatcher began asking questions, and I answered each one as calmly as I could, forcing myself to lay out the facts. The type of drug, the prepared papers, the address. I heard the typing of keys, the clipped tone of assurance that officers were already on their way. I was advised not to return, to stay safe, to let the professionals handle it. But safety no longer felt like enough. I couldn't sit in my chair while Michael destroyed evidence, while he twisted the story into something else. For once in my life, I couldn't choose comfort over courage. I looked at Eleanor's smile again and whispered, "You wouldn't run." The driver caught my eye in the mirror. "Everything all right back there, sir?" "No," I said quietly. "Not anymore. Change of plans. We're going back to Montclair." The words settled in my chest like iron. I was driving back toward betrayal, toward danger, toward a son I no longer recognized. But I was also driving toward truth. And for the first time that night I felt clear. The drive back to Montclair felt heavier than the ride away. The driver glanced at me more than once, his eyes flicking nervously in the mirror, but he said nothing. I sat rigid in the back seat, my phone in my hand, listening to the dispatcher's voice echo in my memory. "Officers are en route. Estimated arrival 20 minutes. Every mile closer to that house felt like a step deeper into a wound I could not ignore. When we reached the quiet street again, the mansion loomed ahead, glowing warmly against the dark. It looked unchanged, as though nothing had happened inside it, as though no betrayal had been poured into my glass an hour earlier. My pulse thudded hard in my chest as I told the driver to wait around the corner. He frowned, but nodded, pulling the car into the shadows of a side street. I stepped out, the night air cool on my face, my breath unsteady. As I walked up the long curved driveway, headlights appeared at the far end of the street. 2 dark vehicles glided silently, their lights off, until the last moment when a quick flash confirmed they were unmarked police. They rolled slowly past me, pulling into position near the house. My throat tightened with both relief and dread. This was real. There was no turning back now. The door loomed before me, polished wood gleaming beneath the porch light. My hand trembled as I pressed the bell. The chime echoed through the house like a funeral toll. Footsteps came quickly, too quickly, striking the marble floor inside. The door swung open, and there stood Michael. Relief and suspicion warred across his face. "Dad, where have you been?" he said, his smile stretched too wide. "We were worried sick." His eyes flicked past me toward the driveway, searching the darkness, his voice tight beneath the forced warmth. I forced my lips into a faint smile. "Sorry, son. Needed some air. Felt dizzy after all that rich food. Time got away from me." I gestured vaguely toward the street, my voice steady though my legs shook. "Beautiful neighborhood you have here." Behind him, Claire appeared, her dress slightly wrinkled from pacing. Her mask of perfect hostess slipped just enough to reveal raw panic before she pulled it tight again. "Jonathan, you scared us. We thought something terrible had happened." She reached for my arm, her fingers cold and clinging. "Are you feeling better now?" "Much better," I said, allowing her to guide me inside. Just needed to clear my head. The foyer no longer dazzled me. The chandeliers, the flowers, the gleaming marble all seemed like props in a cruel play. I could feel the weight of the officers outside, waiting, watching. My chest tightened with each step deeper into the house. "Perhaps you had too much wine," Claire said, her laugh brittle. "Let's get you some water." "Actually," I said evenly, "I think I'd like to sit back down at the table if that's all right." Michael and Claire exchanged a glance, too quick to hide. Their smiles returned, but their eyes betrayed unease. "Of course, Dad, whatever you want," Michael said, his voice bright and strained. The dining room was almost exactly as I had left it, though I noticed the papers that had once been spread across the sideboard were gone. The plates were stacked neatly now, the table reset as if for another course. Isabel moved quietly in the background, her steps sharper, her eyes flicking nervously toward me. I sat at the head of the table again, my hands folded in front of me, pretending calm. Michael slid into the chair beside me, Claire to my other side, their movements rehearsed. The atmosphere buzzed with tension, each of us waiting for the next move. "So, Dad, feeling better?" Michael asked, his tone almost casual. "No more dizziness." "Clear as a bell, son," I said softly. Fresh air worked wonders. Claire leaned forward, her voice smooth. "You know, rich meals can affect people differently as we get older. Perhaps next time something lighter." "Next time," I repeated, my gaze steady on hers. Michael drummed his fingers lightly against the mahogany, a habit from childhood that betrayed his nerves. He stood abruptly and crossed to the liquor cabinet. "One more toast before the night ends, Dad. This whiskey deserves a proper finish." I watched him pour, his hands steady but his shoulders taut. He lingered over my glass again, the liquid swirling slightly different from his own. He carried the tumblers back to the table, setting mine carefully before me, his smile forced. Before I could lift it, 3 sharp knocks rattled the front door. Heavy, deliberate, unmistakable. "Police! Open the door." The glass slipped from Michael's hand, shattering on the floor, amber spreading across marble like spilled secrets. His face drained of all color. Claire froze, her hand tightening painfully on my arm. Isabel stopped mid-step, her eyes wide but steady. The sound of more footsteps thundered in the foyer, followed by voices, firm and professional. "Montclair Police Department, search warrant, hands where we can see them." Michael stumbled back, his lips moving without words, his eyes darting from me to the door to the broken glass at his feet. Claire's perfect mask shattered, her expression twisting in fear. I rose slowly from my chair, the untouched glass of poisoned whiskey still in my hand. The officers swept into the dining room, their presence filling every corner of the polished space. The scene froze in a single moment, the truth crashing down around us with the force of reality. My heart pounded as I stood between the son I had once loved and the justice that now stood ready at his door. The dining room fell silent except for the sound of boots against marble and the clink of handcuffs being drawn. Michael stood frozen, his face the color of chalk, while Claire's eyes darted wildly from one officer to the next, as though she might still find an escape. I held the untouched glass in my hand, the amber liquid swirling with faint sediment that caught the chandelier light. It looked innocent enough, but we all knew it was not. "Richard Collins, you are under arrest for attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse." The senior officer's voice rang with authority that filled the room. "You have the right to remain silent." Michael flinched as the words struck him. His mouth opened, but no sound came at first. Then, in a voice cracked with desperation, he said, "This is insane. Dad, tell them. Tell them this is a mistake." His eyes begged me, the same eyes that once pleaded for extra allowance or forgiveness for a broken window. But I saw no innocence there now, only the raw fear of a man caught. "There is no mistake," I said, my voice steady though my chest ached. "This glass contains more than whiskey. You poured it for me with your own hands." The junior officer stepped forward, gloved and professional, taking the glass from me carefully. He held it up to the light, the faint particles visible even without special equipment. The evidence was plain. Claire broke first. "Jonathan, please," she cried, her voice high and frantic. "This isn't what it looks like." Michael panicked. "That's all." "He didn't mean any harm." "Enough," the senior officer said firmly, moving closer to her. "Claire Collins, you are also under arrest as a co-conspirator." Her face drained of all color. "No, you don't understand," she insisted, clutching the edge of the table with white knuckles. "He forced me. I didn't have a choice." The officer's expression did not change. "We have evidence of your involvement in planning and preparing this attempt. You will have the opportunity to explain yourself in court." Michael suddenly found his voice again, breaking into a torrent of words. "Dad, listen to me. You don't understand. They threatened me. The loan sharks. I had no choice. They said they'd break my legs, kill me." His voice cracked into a sob. "Please, Dad, I didn't want to hurt you." "You had choices," I said quietly, though the words cut my own throat as I spoke them. "You chose gambling over family. You chose lies over honesty. And tonight, you chose to poison your own father." The officers moved to secure them both, the metallic click of handcuffs sharp in the tense air. Claire sobbed loudly, her voice shrill, while Michael hung his head, his shoulders shaking with each shallow breath. Isabel stood in the corner, her hands clasped tight, her face pale but steady. Our eyes met for the briefest moment, and I saw in hers the confirmation of what I already knew. She had been the one to warn me, the silent guardian in a house filled with betrayal. As the officers led Michael and Claire toward the door, Michael twisted back toward me, his face contorted in anguish. "How could you do this to your own family?" he cried. "Mom would be heartbroken." My throat burned as I answered. "Your mother valued truth above comfort. She would never forgive what you tried to do tonight." He staggered, as though my words struck harder than the cuffs that bound his wrists. Claire screamed his name, trying to pull away from the officer's grip, but her strength faltered under the weight of reality. The foyer filled with the sound of heavy steps, radios crackling, doors opening. Blue and red lights from the waiting cars spilled through the windows, painting the polished walls with harsh colors. The perfect illusion of wealth and success dissolved under that glow, revealing the desperate lies it had been built upon. I stood alone in the dining room, the scent of bourbon heavy in the air, the shattered glass still glistening on the marble floor. My hand trembled as I pressed it against the table's edge, the wood smooth and cold beneath my palm. The son I once raised, the woman he had chosen, the family I thought I might reclaim all of it stripped bare in a single night. Isabel stepped forward quietly, her voice soft. "I'm sorry, Mr. Collins." I lowered my eyes and shook my head. "No," I said. "You did what was right. You may have saved my life." The house seemed to sigh as the door closed behind them, leaving me in silence once more. Only this time it was not the quiet of loneliness, but the stillness after a storm, the kind that leaves destruction behind yet clears the air. My chest ached, my heart heavy with grief and relief tangled together. I picked up the last photo of Eleanor I carried in my wallet and set it gently on the table. Her smile met mine through the glass, steady and unshaken. I whispered to her, "I chose truth, even though it broke me." And in that moment, though the weight of betrayal pressed against me, I felt her hand on my shoulder as if she approved. The ride to the station was a blur of flashing lights and muffled voices. I sat in the back of the cruiser, my hands folded tightly in my lap, staring at the reflection of blue and red dancing across the glass. My heart beat with a heavy rhythm, not the frantic pounding from earlier, but something slower, weighted with sorrow. Michael sat in another car, separated from me, and Claire in yet another. I tried not to picture their faces, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael as a boy, running into the waves at Coney Island, his laughter carried by the wind. The memory clashed with the image of him at the table, pouring bourbon into my glass with shaking hands. When we arrived, the building smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. The fluorescent lights were harsh, buzzing faintly, casting everything in an unkind brightness. An officer guided me to a chair in a quiet room, a table before me, a glass of water set down gently at my elbow. Across from me sat Detective Harrison, a man with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to read more than words. He leaned forward, hands clasped. "Mr. Collins, I need you to walk me through everything, start to finish." I began with the phone call from Michael, the surprise invitation to dinner, the hope that filled me after so much silence. I told him about the mansion, about Claire's rehearsed warmth, about Isabel's trembling hands. My voice shook when I described the taste of the bourbon, the dizziness that came too quickly, the questions about retirement and succession that felt less like curiosity and more like interrogation. Then I told him about the message, the simple words that had saved me, and about slipping through the kitchen to the back door. Harrison listened without interruption, his pen scratching steadily against a yellow pad. When I reached the part about the anonymous call in the car, his brow furrowed. This person knew the name of the drug. They knew about the documents. That specific knowledge. Do you have any idea who it was? I hesitated, picturing Isabel at the sink, her silence speaking louder than words. "I don't know," I said carefully, "but I think it was someone inside that house, someone who couldn't stay quiet." The detective nodded slowly. "We'll look into it. What matters is you acted before it was too late. That substance combined with alcohol could have made you compliant, unable to resist signing anything. It might have killed you outright if the dosage was wrong." The words struck me hard. I tightened my grip on the water glass, the coolness grounding me. Through the glass wall of the room I could see movement down the hall. Michael sat hunched in a holding cell, his head in his hands, rocking slightly. Claire was farther down, her sobs echoing faintly even through the walls. I forced myself to look away, but my reflection in the glass betrayed me, my eyes filled with a grief I could not hide. Harrison set his pen down. "Attempted poisoning alone carries 8 to 12 years minimum. Add conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse, you're looking at 15 to 20. Your son is in serious trouble." My throat tightened. "He's still my son," I said, the words heavy with despair. "I know," the detective replied gently, "but adult children make their own choices. This wasn't yours." Silence stretched between us, filled only by the hum of the lights. I thought of Eleanor, of her faith that family could always find their way back. I had believed her for so long. Tonight had proved her wrong, and yet I still longed to believe she wasn't, that some part of Michael could be saved. From down the hall his voice rose suddenly, desperate and loud. "Dad!" His eyes found me through the glass, wild with panic. "Please, Dad, I'll pay it back. I'll go to treatment. I'll change." The same promises I had heard in different forms years before, each one broken, each one leaving me more alone. Detective Harrison's gaze met mine, steady and firm. "He'll try to manipulate you. It's a pattern." I swallowed hard and nodded, though my heart resisted. Claire's voice carried next, high and pleading. "Jonathan, I never wanted this. He made me help. I was scared. Please tell them." My hands tightened into fists on the table. Their words tangled in my ears, desperate justifications from two people who had already made their choice. Harrison slid the glass of water closer to me. "You've done the right thing tonight, Mr. Collins. I know it doesn't feel that way now, but you're here because you listened, because you chose truth." I lowered my eyes to the table. My chest ached, as though something had split open inside me. I wanted to believe truth was enough, that justice could balance the scales. But as I sat there in that bright, cold room, I felt only the weight of what I had lost, heavier than anything I had built in all my years. Hours later, when the statements were taken and the paperwork filled, an officer guided me toward the exit. The night air outside was cool and sharp, carrying the faint scent of rain. I paused at the door, my wallet still in my hand, Eleanor's photo pressed between my fingers. Her smile looked back at me, unwavering, steady as ever. I whispered to her. I told the truth, even though it broke me. And for the first time in years, I felt tears spill freely, not from loneliness, but from the unbearable cost of honesty. The station had thinned out by the time I was allowed to leave the interview room. The noise of arrests and paperwork echoed faintly down the hall, but the waiting area was nearly empty. I sat on a hard bench, Eleanor's photo still clutched in my hand, when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, though by now I had an idea who it might be. I answered quietly. "Mr. Collins, are you safe?" The voice was no longer disguised, warmer now, filled with concern. "Isabel." My chest tightened with both relief and gratitude. "Yes," I said. "They're in custody. It's over, at least for tonight." She drew in a breath on the other end, the kind of breath a person takes when they've been holding their fears too long. "I wasn't sure if you'd make it out," she whispered. "When you walked past me in the kitchen, I wanted to scream, to tell you everything. But if they knew I had spoken, they would have destroyed me too." Her words struck me deeper than I expected. "You risked everything," I said. "Your job, maybe more. Why?" "Because you treated me like a human being," she said softly. "In that house, I was invisible. They spoke as if I couldn't understand, as if I were just furniture. But you looked me in the eye. You said thank you. You reminded me of my father. I couldn't let them do it to you." My throat ached. "Isabel, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life." Silence stretched for a moment, and then she said quietly, "I don't have another job. After tonight, I doubt anyone will hire me with their reference." I closed my eyes. The answer came to me as easily as breathing. "I own restaurants," I said, 7 of them. "And one of them needs a manager I can trust. Someone with judgment, with courage, with heart. Someone like you." She gasped softly. "Mr. Collins, you don't have to do this." "It's not charity," I told her firmly. "I need good people, Isabel. Tonight you proved you're exactly that. I'll start you at 60,000. Health benefits, training, a real path to grow. All I ask is that you show up Monday morning at the Crown Heights location, 10 o'clock sharp. I'll be there to meet you." Her voice cracked with emotion. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come," I said gently. There was a pause, then a whispered, "I'll be there. Thank you." When the call ended, I sat back on the bench, staring at the ceiling of the station lobby. For the first time since Eleanor died, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just relief, and it wasn't joy. It was the weight of knowing someone had chosen to stand beside me when family had turned against me. Detective Harrison walked by, pausing to hand me a copy of the report. He noticed the faint smile tugging at my mouth. "Long night," he said, "but you've got an ally now." I nodded, my voice low. An unexpected one. By the time I stepped outside, the sky was heavy with clouds, the air damp and cool. A police car idled nearby, ready to drive me home. As I climbed in, I held Eleanor's photo in one hand and my phone in the other, Isabel's number saved now among the few I still trusted. The ride back to Brooklyn was quiet. Streetlights flashed rhythmically across the windows. casting patterns that reminded me of long drives home from vacations when Michael was small, asleep in the back seat. The memory stabbed at me, but I forced myself to breathe through it. Some bonds were gone, but others were being written anew. When we reached my house, I stood on the porch for a long while before unlocking the door. The refrigerator hummed inside. The chipped mug still sat drying on the rack, and the photo of Eleanor waited for me on the table. I set Isabel's number beside it, written on a small slip of paper, and whispered to the empty kitchen, "Maybe families do find their way back, just not always the way we expect." I turned off the lights and sat down in my worn chair. The silence of the house wrapped around me, but it felt different now. Not just loneliness, but the beginning of something else. A quiet strength born from truth, from survival, from the loyalty of someone I had barely known until tonight. An unexpected ally had given me back more than safety. She had given me a reason to hope again. The morning after felt strange, as though the night before had been some long and fevered dream. Yet the chipped mug was still drying by the sink. The bourbon bottle still sat unopened on the counter, and the echo of handcuffs clicking shut still rang faintly in my ears. I walked through the quiet house, touching the walls, the furniture, as if to confirm that I had truly come home alive. Outside, the neighborhood looked the same, children running to school buses, Mrs. Harris sweeping her steps, but I no longer felt like the same man who had left this house hours earlier. I opened the refrigerator and stared at the photos held by magnets. There was Michael, grinning in his graduation cap, his mother's arm wrapped proudly around him. There was a picture from our trip to the shore, his little hands clutching an ice cream cone that melted faster than he could eat. My hand trembled as I lifted the photo of him and set it carefully in a drawer. I could not bring myself to destroy it, but I could no longer look at it each day either. The photo of Eleanor remained in its place, her smile steady, her presence unshaken, the anchor of my life. I sat at the table and poured myself a cup of coffee. The steam rose slowly, curling in the air, and I thought about the trial that awaited. I would be called to testify. I would have to describe in detail how my son had tried to poison me, how he had planned to steal everything Eleanor and I had built together. I would have to speak those words aloud, each one a nail sealing the coffin of our relationship. My chest tightened, but I knew there was no avoiding it. The truth had to be spoken, even if it cut me open each time. The phone buzzed with another message, this one from Detective Harrison. Both suspects formally charged. Preliminary hearing scheduled for August. Your testimony will be critical. I set the phone down, staring at it, wondering how I would stand in that courtroom and look at Michael without breaking. I thought of Isabel then, her trembling hands at the sink, her silent warning that had saved me. She would be at the restaurant Monday, starting a new chapter. It gave me a flicker of peace to know that something good had come from the wreckage, that courage had been rewarded. Perhaps that was the way life balanced itself, taking away in one hand while offering with the other. The rest of the day drifted slowly. I walked through the park near my house, watching families on benches, fathers lifting children onto their shoulders, mothers laughing beside them. I remembered carrying Michael on mine, his small hands gripping my hair, his laughter ringing in my ears. The memory stabbed at me, sharp and unrelenting, but I let it linger. To erase it would be to erase the best parts of him, the parts that once made me believe he could be more than the man he became. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time since Eleanor passed. I wrote about the dinner, the message, the escape, the call, the return with the police. I wrote about Michael's eyes as they begged me to deny what I knew was true. And I wrote about Eleanor, about how I hoped she would understand that choosing truth had been the only way to honor her memory. When I closed the book, my hand ached from the effort, but my heart felt a little lighter. As the days passed, I settled into a rhythm again, though nothing felt truly the same. The restaurant still needed me. The staff still called with questions. Life went on. Yet every time my phone buzzed, I half expected to see Michael's name again. He had tried to reach me from the cell once, his voice raw and desperate, but I could not bring myself to answer. Some words, once spoken, cannot be undone. On Sunday evening, I stood at the window and watched the sun sink behind the city skyline. The light painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and I thought about shadows, about how even the brightest days cast them. Michael lived in those shadows now, the part of my family I could no longer claim but could never completely forget. I wondered if prison would harden him further, or if it would finally force him to face the man he had become. I whispered into the quiet, "Eleanor, I don't know if he can ever come back to us. I don't know if forgiveness has a place in this story." The wind stirred outside, rattling the branches of the tree by the porch, and for a moment I felt as if she were there, reminding me that the future is never certain, that even broken people sometimes find a way to rebuild. I closed the curtains and turned off the lights. The house settled around me, familiar and steady. Yet in the silence I knew the story was not finished. My son was still out there, behind walls, but still part of me. Family remains in the shadows whether we invite it or not, and though justice had been served, the question of redemption lingered like a quiet echo, one I would carry with me into every tomorrow. In the end, I learned that truth can wound as deeply as it heals. I lost the son I thought I was gaining back, yet I found courage in an unexpected ally and the strength to protect the legacy Eleanor and I built with our own hands. Betrayal may have darkened my family, but honesty lit a path forward. Sometimes family remains in the shadows, but character shines in the light. What would you have done if you were in my place? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories of family and truth.